Hello, and welcome to this video produced by the League of Women Voters of California Local League Coaches on tips for writing pro and con presentations for local ballot measures. LWV California provides resources for state ballot measures, but for local measures, we have to create our own pro and con documents. I'm Nancy Marr from the Palos Verdes Peninsula League and the LA County League. My colleagues today are Robbie Davis from the Pasadena Area League and Tom Carson from the Greater Los Angeles Area League. We are all local league coaches. I will present some overview material, and Robbie and Tom will follow up with detailed information. First, whatever you include in your presentation must be factual, providing accurate information for your audience. Personal viewpoints can't be a part of your presentation. Factual information enables a voter to make an educated decision on the issue. And you need to keep your word choice and sentence structure as simple and straightforward as possible. Voters need to be able to fully understand your comments. Slide. There is an established process to pro and con presentation. First, research. This is the basis for your presentation. You need to gather information about the subject of the ballot measure and about its potential, positive and negative impacts, how people would be affected. Next, writing the document, putting your research results into a clear, cohesive, and informative presentation. And then editing your draft to smooth out the flow of the presentation, catch any errors, and produce a final document. Remember, it's hard to do your own editing. You will need other readers. It's helpful if you have a team working on this project together. Not only does this share the load, it also provides multiple viewpoints. Now we're going to look at each of these elements in more detail, and I'm going to begin with research. Slide. You need to use local resources to find out about a local measure. There's likely to be an official statement about the measure that has been prepared by the city or county to which the measure applies. This is a good place to start. That statement will give you basic facts. The statement would probably be available on the city or county website, but if it's not, you could call the city clerk or the county public information officer. Most counties have one. In addition, the county supervisor has a public information officer. Each county supervisor has one. Usually the city attorney or the county council will have a prepared analysis of the measure for the city council members or for the board of supervisors. You can call these offices and request a copy. It will explain the existing situation and why the measure is being considered. It may also give you some pro and con points that you can use in your presentation. You can contact your local city council member or your county supervisor. They may have perspectives on the measure. If the voter guide or sample ballot is available, you can look there for a summary, for the fiscal impact, and for arguments for and against the measure. Local newspapers usually have articles and opinion or op-ed pieces on local measures. These articles may provide good background information or historical context. But in using these resources, you do need to be sure that you use only factual information. You may have to do a little fact checking in order to avoid editorial slant. Sometimes supporters or opponents of a measure will post messages online, maybe even have websites. As with the press, if you include these postings in your research, you'll have to sift through the messages to use only the factual, unbiased information. At this point, you are likely to have enough rough information to form into your narrative. As you proceed with the writing document, you can always do additional research as you go along if you need to. So now I will turn the program over to Robbie, who will continue.
Next. So I'm going to talk about writing. And when you're doing your local pros and cons, the local length or the total length of the document should be somewhere between 500 and 600 words, and that would include the headings. And having it restricted to this length basically makes it easier to fit each measure onto a single written page if you're doing a written version. And it also just increases the chances that the voter's going to read the whole thing. And also make sure that you use a font size that's large enough for easy reading, or if you're doing a PowerPoint, for easy viewing. The title that appears at the top of your document should be the official title and number from the city attorney or the county council. You also should include what type of measure it is. Is it a tax? Is it a bond measure, charter amendment? And also how it was put on the ballot. Did the city council vote? Were their signatures collected? So that's always a good thing for voters to know. The League of Women Voters of California has been using a standard format that seems to work well for state measures. And you don't have to use this exact format, but you should make sure that you have included all of the elements that are listed there on the screen. So let's go ahead and talk about each of the elements. Next slide. So the first part of the document would start with the question, and the question generally begins with something like, should the city/county, whatever. An example that from recently from Los Angeles, should the LA County Board of Supervisors be authorized to remove a sheriff from office? So just a single sentence, is if you can manage it. And if possible, you might want to actually look up what the verbiage is from the city attorney or the county council and use that as the question. Make it as concise as you can. You don't have to include all the details of the measure at this point. You'll go into that later. And just remember that there is a California law that requires that a yes vote means yes and a no vote means no. So the way you form your question should follow that rule, and hopefully the ballot measure itself has followed that rule. And another thing you might want to let the voter know is if something other than a simple majority is required to pass the measure. So is it 2/3 or 60% or something? So that's would be something that the voter might want to know. So next slide. So the next thing you want to include in your document is the situation, and the whole purpose of a ballot measure is to change something. So it's important that the voter knows background information about the way things are right now. Is there an existing tax that's going to be raised? Is there a law? What law is going to be amended? And you also might put in some historical information. Have there been previous ballot measures on this same subject? And what was the outcome of that election? And try again to keep the explanation no longer than one paragraph. Next. So the next part of your document will be the proposal. Then this is where you explain to the voter exactly what this ballot measure is proposing to do. So you want to list the main provisions of the measure and which are the ones that you think will have the greatest potential impact on the voter. And sometimes you have to use your own judgment, but select the most important items, maybe no more than 4 or 5 of them. Use bullets in your document because that just makes the list more readable. And with each of these, just explain what will change in the current situation that we've already talked about if the measure should pass. So for example, the current annual library parcel tax is $25, but this measure would increase it to $35. So just keep the changes, very concise. Next slide. So the next part of your document will be the fiscal effect of this measure. So you want to use the source documents that Nancy talked about earlier to explain to the voter what the money effects is going to be on them or on the government entity that's involved. So is it going to raise your taxes? Is the government going to get into more indebtedness if this is a bond measure? Will it only affect certain people? And then another interesting thing to explain would be what would happen fiscally if the measure doesn't pass. So for example, will there be a loss of services or a loss of facilities? And again, bullet points are a really good way to kind of organize this and make it more readable. So now I'm going to turn things over to Tom Carson to finish up. Next slide.
Okay, Robbie, and you're going to put the information in the chat.
Yes, the information, there is actually a link to examples of local ballot measure pros and cons that is in the chat right now. So if you go to the chat, you should be able to copy that and then use it to access that document.
Okay, great. So the next part of the presentation is to include the arguments presented by supporters or opponents of the ballot measure as they explain why they think you should either support it or oppose it. It's very important here that equal space be given to both sides so that the league isn't accused of being biased in one side or the other. It's good to list the arguments in bullet form because adding numbers might lead someone to say you're giving a priority to number one, and that's more important than number two or number three, etc. That's not the way it should be done. It's best to use the exact language of the supporters of the opponents, although let's face the practical solutions is sometimes their arguments go on and on and on, so you would have to figure out a way to come to a precise summary of the effort or the purpose of the argument rather than every single word of it. But again, there should be an equal number of bullet points on both sides, and if possible, an almost equal number of words included on each side. It's important in reviewing these arguments that, and before you write them out, to make sure that they're objective and not inflammatory attacks that have no real basis in actuality. And that you don't want to use anything that you believe falsely presents the facts about the ballot measure or the facts of the current situation. You definitely should not use arguments from the league if your league is supporting or opposing a ballot measure. That's not the purpose of this. We are trying to present the public approach to this and not arguing for our league position. So it should not list any league arguments that may have been presented. Similar to this is to list some of the supporters and opponents of the measure. They may be a long list of such supporters, but it's best to focus really on who are maybe the top 2 or 3 most important ones. It might be those who are contributing the most money to support or oppose the proposition. That's a very important, relevant piece of information for almost all voters. Provide a single website address if there are websites that are on the internet supporting or opposing, so that people can gain additional information besides what you're presenting in your publication. If there are no websites on one side or the other, you can use an email address if one of those are publicly available for some of the one or more of the supporters, but only if there's no website at all. And particularly do not list the league as a supporter or opponent of the measure. Definitely never try to write your own arguments. If you come into a situation, which does sometimes happen, that there is no public information from one side or the other, you just can make a statement to that effect, that no arguments are publicly available. You don't have to make anything up on your own. Okay, Nancy mentioned earlier about editing. It's very, very important as a quality control check to establish a process for someone other than the writer to carefully review the first draft of the publication for accuracy, for appropriateness. The editor would be expected to double check your research, going to websites, going to the public analysis done by city or county government, just to double check. Also to consider the language. Again, as Nancy mentioned, it should be understandable, so we don't use highly technical terms. We try to use day-to-day kind of language so that everyone, or the broadest number of people, will be able to understand the thrust of your discussion. Clearly, the writer is free to be double checking his or her own work, but there has to really be at least one other person that would review it with an independent point of view and double check for accuracy and understandability. It's also good, for the state ballot measures, for most of them, if the area is more complex, either in terms of the new proposed provisions, or as to the existing factual situation, the state league will provide an additional lengthier document called an in-depth, which provides that information and makes it available to the league presenters so that they have further background in case they get questions while they're making their presentations. Again, that should be written probably by the same person who's done the pro and con, but also edited and reviewed. Important in all of this is to get the word out about what resources that we have for the voter, what we can help the voter get educated on. So definitely the finished document should be available on the league's website, should be included on Vote 411. It should be spread in social media. Any way that you get the members out, the information out there to not just your members, but also to the general public. It's also important to train your members who are going to be the presenters of these kind of publications, this information. There are many of our league members who are teachers or others who have vast experience of public speaking, but there's a lot of new younger members who perhaps haven't had that chance in their work or college years and really need some help. So that should be part of the overall program of doing this, which you would be doing anyway for people who are presenting the state ballot measures. Again, spreading the word. Oops. You send emails to local organizations advertising these services that you're providing, and also notify local media outlets, local newspapers. If there are places to post it on other public websites, that would be wonderful. We've had occasions where local leagues have done this when no one else has done it in their area, and they get thousands of hits, which is showing that we're doing a great job at fulfilling a great need, and we're maybe one of the few people to do such work. Now, Robbie put a link to a location on the league website, the state league website, about local pros and cons that have been done and presented previously. For a similar basis of knowledge, you can go to the state level pros and cons from the 2022 election, which will give you samples of various pro-con presentations and in-depth presentations. So there's a link here, cavotes.org/vote/election/ballot measures, where you could go and look and just see how those flow and how detailed or not detailed they are, how high level and how important the language is in terms of understandability. If any of you have questions on this, you are free to call any of the, or not call, or just email any of us three, Robbie, Nancy, or myself, or it's our personal email address for you to be able to reach us, and we will be prompt to respond to you. So we thank you very much, and hopefully you have found this presentation useful to you in your league work, both for the March and for the November elections this year. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.